Sorry, I think my internet just dropped a little bit, but again, good morning and thank you for joining us for Metamorphosis, Legacy, Transformation, and the Business of Design. A Q&A session will be held at the end of the presentation, so please enter your questions into chat. I'm now going to turn it over to Elisabeth.
Good morning, and hold on, I have to share my screen. Good morning, and thank you again for joining me and the panelists for today's presentation at AIA San Francisco. The presentation is about metamorphosis, legacy, transformation, and the business of design. First of all, I wanted to thank the AIA San Francisco chapter for setting the event up, and special thanks go to event and brand strategist Lisa Bockeran. To give you some insight into my background, I work as an A&D business strategist, a management consultant, and a leadership coach. My path was shaped by 25 years or so working with 40 A&D firms as project and lead designer, as part of management teams, and then firm leadership teams, and since 5 years as an A&D business strategy consultant and owner of my own architecture firm. My approach working with clients combines business strategy with leadership coaching. Today's event continues a dialogue I started in 2018 with a series of presentations I'm organizing to offer fresh perspectives on topics relevant to A&D practices. Some of the events are available on AIAU as recorded programs to earn educational learning units. The 2021 Think Time Tuesday series with AIA LA offers a glance at my thinking about business strategy for A&D practices in the areas of brand, finances, operations, and design or practice. Other events are centered around topics like entrepreneurship, mentorship, international practice, and ownership transition. Recordings of most events are available on my website's event page. My monthly newsletters offer insight into my thinking. The latest two circled around A&D firm leadership transitions. Ownership transition was listed as one of the top issues facing architecture firms by Kermit Baker, the AIA's chief economist, in his 2022 first quarter presentation. Over the years, I've been involved in successful transitions involving changes to leadership teams, as well as ownership groups, both as a firm leader myself and now as a consultant. What I have observed is this: a shared vision eventually makes for a successful transition. Growing up in the A&D world meant for me and many A&D leaders of my generation putting in a lot of hours at work with the goal to achieve the best outcome or simply to be seen as a leader. When working with the younger professionals, I often observe a different sense of what leadership is and should be about. Often overlooked in the visioning process is succession planning or an exit strategy for firm founders. Successful long-range planning for A&D practice leadership transformations include adding new leaders early on to expand and evolve the firm's viewpoints. Ahead of the firm's leaders' retirement. In doing so, these new leaders will have the runway to put their skin in the game in a way that includes their vision. Today's event is about metamorphosis, legacy, and transformation, and it is structured in 4 parts. We are already in the midst of part 1, the host and event introduction. Part 2 introduces you to each panelist's path to ownership. Part 3 opens the conversations up to topics relevant to leadership transitions. And lastly, in part 4, we open up for Q&A. So let me briefly introduce you to the panelists. Each panelist will give a synopsis of their path to leadership before we engage in conversations after that. Dong Kim is partner in San Francisco's Brand Office of Dialogue, an international multidisciplinary firm with about 600 employees. I met Dong 4 years ago when he hired me as a business strategist to work with him and his firm of 10 staff to create a path for growth in the leadership team and a path to expand the firm's portfolio. The firm's focus on community-oriented projects like K through 12 schools, higher education, and civic projects are tied to Dong's values and are prevalent in Dialogue's portfolio. Jill Neubauer owns a residential practice with about 12 staff on Cape Cod. She hired me last year to work with her and her staff on creating a master plan for the firm, a plan that offers more freedom for herself, while also mapping a future for the firm she started almost 30 years ago. The firm's striving for excellence are rooted in Jill's values. Amanda Behnke is partner at San Diego-based HGW, or Hannah Gabriel Wells, an architecture firm with about 20 staff and a practice that spans institutional, healthcare, commercial, residential, and housing projects. Amanda hired me last year to facilitate the firm's leadership retreat centered around leadership transition and bringing a succession plan to life. The firm's eagerness to produce high-quality work can be traced back to the 6 principles personality profiles. What the panelists have in common is that they have skin in the game and know how to create opportunities or make the most out of opportunities presented to them. Dong chose the path of a small firm and was selected early on for leadership by the owner. Dong, you want to give us a little bit more insight into your path?
Elisabeth, first of all, I wanted to thank everybody for inviting me here, AIA San Francisco and Elisabeth as well. And more importantly, it was really actually fun to get to know Amanda and Jill, learning different perspective, how each one of us actually became a leadership position. I'll start with my story is kind of a opportunistic stories, as Elisabeth has kind of pointed out, yet also at the same time, it is fast moving. And to some extent, I personally went through 2.5 times the ownership transition, and I got to where I am. Related to that, I'll give you a little bit of a sob story of my professional growth. I interned for a small practice that evaluated Byron's when I was going to Cal Berkeley. And a little after school, I basically worked for him. And although I was right after school, I actually left the firm. Within 6 months of the practice, I came back because at that time, my boss, Dave Byron's, had a bypass surgery. It was a personal relationship that kind of brought me back to the practice. But little by little, we're a small practice, about 10. I did my own thing. I was kind of running on my own drumbeat and working on fun things like working on 3D renderings back in the days, which is kind of early days of computer modeling, right? But I put my head down, I get my head up, and next thing I know, I'm licensed. And also at the same time, I'm kind of next on the totem pole. And Dave goes, Dong, yeah, what do you think about a partnership? I'm like, okay. I think I was about 27, 28 when this opportunity presented myself. And I was like young, didn't know better, yet also at the same time, very enthusiastic. So I said, yes, let's go for it. And what do you know? In 2008, the financial meltdown, and we really had to make a decision in 2010 whether we make that a go or not. But in 2010, I made a decision that there's no other things to do. The market kind of tanked and all the opportunities are going to be pretty similar somewhere else. So my relationship is going to be okay. So we said yes. I became a partner and I became a shareholder, and we changed our corporate structure from a sole practitioner to an S corporation. And then I became one of the principals. And we grew pretty rapidly in 2015. I guess at 2010, because times were bad, we're down to 3.5 people. But by the time that 2015 rolled around, we're at 13, 14 people. And I'm the managing principal. And I'm just literally pulling people out of the street and like, hey, come work with me and we'll do some projects together. But one thing I realized is that, you know what? I'm really running out of fumes, or running on fumes, I should say. I built the house of cards without a formal structure, QA/QC processes, as well as the back of the house operation, realized that this thing could fall apart any moment. Also, at the same time, I realized that at the end of the day, I'm not really delivering a value that my clients and the public desire. And that's when I engaged Elisabeth. Elisabeth kind of really helped me put a little bit of a brakes on the project pursuit, figure out the back of the house, and also realize that the architecture is really a team practice, meaning I by myself can't really do this. So I kind of considered for an opportunity to bring in a partner around, but as you're all aware, 2017-18, really hard to find people, even now is super challenging. But an opportunity presented itself, a dialogue, who we are, is a firm who focus on design excellence in supporting of community well-being and in pursuit of providing for our environment. So when that is our why, that truly kind of aligned with my why, our conversation really continued or accelerated at a rapid pace, and we merged. It was not an acquisition. We merged in 2020. I've been a part of a dialogue for past about a year and a half. And long story short, the things that really truly aligned with me was that, first of all, our whys were aligned. The community projects that actually benefit for our environment that truly resonated with me, types of projects that we're doing, and also the fact that I have the opportunity and resource to pursue things that are really relevant, fun projects that have more impact, get to know people around the globe, and our team getting to know everybody. So I thought that it was a really good transition. And that's kind of my story, but I kind of want to open it up to Amanda and Jill as well, and maybe talk to you a little bit more later.
Thank you, Dan. Well, Jill, you chose the path of entrepreneurship, and timing and the luck of the find have shaped your path. You want to tell us more about it?
Yes, thank you, Elisabeth. It has been really nice working with Amanda and Dong and you on this panel. Really terrific to hear our different stories. So it's been interesting to getting to know Amanda and Dong as their professional stories. They've already stepped into their agreements, and I'm in the early stages of developing a transition plan. So I'm fortunate in that I always wanted to have a small residential non-urban practice as a sole practitioner, not alone, but small practice without partners. Now, as I dig into the work of imagining the future, it's really fascinating to actually sort out what I want and what might be possible. The things I really know right now is that I want my little firm to have a legacy. I want to share my lifetime of work. I don't want to just close the doors and call the dumpster. I want a way to gently step back, transition slowly out over many years. I'd like to have a place where I can have a helpful relationship with the next generation, and a place that I still call home, where I work a bit. And ideally, I'd appreciate a little source of income out of a plan. So in 2019, an architect joined my firm, and she, Kelly, is now studio lead. When we first met, I had that hopeful, excited thought, oh, might this be my person? Might she be the future of the company? And I've joked with Amanda and Dong and Elisabeth, I think it's like dating, that excited, hopeful feeling that one gets when you go like, oh, this has a lot of possibilities. So Kelly and I are aesthetically and culturally aligned. And that is the core foundation of our relationship. And so she and I are now striving. We're curious and we're looking to the future. In 2021, I was cramming all my AIA classes in one weekend, and I took one of Elisabeth's classes. And I thought, I wonder if she could be a coach and a mentor to me, potentially to both Kelly and me, and help us keep doing the work of getting towards our future. So Elisabeth has also been working with others in the office as a sounding board and a coach. And from the start, looking to the future has really meant taking a deep dive into the firm as it exists now. And this work is really maturing our firm. It's advancing its structure. It's crafting a balance between projects and staff. And that includes, getting the facts in line. So we've been studying the financial facts. For 5 years, even before I met Elisabeth, I've commissioned an annual valuation of the firm to understand its market value. And with this data, I not only compare the performance from year to year, but also its value relative to the industry and its metrics relative to the industry. And from this data, I can also see its market value if there was an external buyer, which is not my interest, or an internal buyer, which is my hope. So more interestingly, beyond the financial work is the bigger work of looking at the fundamental nature and culture, the talent in the firm to strengthen the firm. And we're really doing some wonderful work. Elisabeth has been working very closely with our bookkeeper, who's fully engaged, really as a financial manager. She's our CFO of 12 people. So Elisabeth is mentoring us as a complete firm, not just Kelly and not just me, not just about my having a retirement plan. And this is really, I think, the most interesting work is that it's focused on now to get us to the future, so that, we have a strong culture and an artistic firm that's worth having a future. If this transition is to be successful, I know we all have to have our eyes wide open. So I'm doing this work. Kelly and I are doing this work. The whole firm is involved. We are learning to be leaders and mentors, which is a wonderful thing that this generation is giving us. But I also acknowledge that this may or may not get us to an agreement. I really see that this is a journey for both of us, that we're both on, the firm is on. And I'm hoping that my company has a future, that it's a legacy, that it will continue beyond me. But either way, this work is looking to the future and it's making us stronger right now.
Thank you, Jill. Thank you so much about the compliments as well. Amanda, I want to give the mic to you. So you chose the path to navigate, you chose to navigate the path of mid-sized and large architecture firms.
Yes.
And you were encouraged to walk the leadership path by a group of owners. Why don't you give us a little more insight into your path?
Yes. Well, first, I'd like to thank AIA San Francisco and Elisabeth for the invitation to join the panel. And I'd also like to thank Dong and Jill. It's been so great to be able to share our personal journeys with one another. It's been great talking with you both. So my story, our firm originally began as Architects Hannah Gabriel Wells, founded by Randy Hanna, Jim Gabriel, and Matt Wells. And we're known as HGW. And the firm is now celebrating this month their 25th anniversary. So it's great to be here and be able to talk about legacy. And I started with the firm in 2006. I'm a graduate of the University of Miami School of Architecture. And when I started with HGW, the firm was only about 9 years old and had around 10 employees or so. And I chose the photo on the intro slide, which is the Ocean Beach People's Co-op Market, because it had been completed a few years before I joined the firm, and it is a symbol of legacy to me. Holds a lot of the values that the firm was founded on that we still hold on to today, from sustainability to making an impact in our community. And even at the time, it was a new project type for the firm, so that being open to trying new project types was inspiring to me then and is inspiring to me now. So at the time, I always thought in my mind early on in my career, I'd eventually want to become a business owner, but I didn't know what that path would be. And I, at that time, just wanted to do exciting work and work on diverse project types. And it was right around the time that I started studying for my exams that a mentor first said to me, be prepared for this to be a marathon. This will not happen overnight, you know, from your licensure to getting to a point where you're managing project teams, then to the path to ownership. That was important insight at the time because I really didn't have an idea of what that time frame would look like. So I took my time and I enjoyed the project work and I made incremental progress in my own professional development. And I worked at HCW until 2010. And then I spent the following 6 years working for 2 large firms, which was pivotal in my career and professional development. One of the firms had majority of their project focus in healthcare and was based on the East Coast. So that was my first experience working at a larger firm, cross offices. And from there, I went on to work at Gensler, which then, of course, working at a global firm, I continued to gain incredible experience and meet some amazing mentors along the way. And years then passed, and my interest in becoming a principal or firm leader started to solidify when I saw through great mentors, I enjoyed mentoring others and saw how great leadership led to great project work. So I began thinking long-term about what my plan would be. And it was around that time that I started talking to the founding principals of HCW again. And I wasn't necessarily thinking about ownership yet, but another step along the way where I could go back to a mid-sized studio and help shape the firm for that next chapter. And around that time, the principals from HCW did share that they had created a succession plan. So that was exciting to me. There was no indication on who that next generation of partners would be, but for me, it was exciting to hear that the firm was going to become a legacy firm. So from there, I started back up at HCW in 2016, and over the years, I did continue to ask them about the succession plan and the details of it, and I let them know that I was interested in becoming a partner, that was a goal of mine. I had seen through colleagues that had implemented succession plans, a little bit more about how they worked, and I started to understand more of the details of it. So then it was in 2019 that I was asked if I'd like to become a partner, and those discussions went on for a few months. And I became a partner, and I was announced at the beginning of 2020. So it's been 2 years now, and there are 3 of us in the next generation of partners. And it's an exciting time for me professionally, but also for the studio. You know, we've grown over time from a small to a mid-sized firm, and it's exciting times for us, and the journey continues.
Right. Well, thank you. So let's start our conversations, conversations around transformations, transitions, and succession planning. Amanda, I will bring you back on the spot again. So how did you choose the firm or the firms you joined, and what were the criteria? And I want to bring Jill in the same conversation. How did you choose the team to bring on into the leadership? What mattered to you? You have different perspectives as the incoming kind of leader and as the leader that looks for the next generation.
Well, I think from my perspective, I had the benefit of working at HCW before, so I already knew the leadership team, even just beyond the founding principals, the other leaders in the office, enjoyed working with them, enjoyed the work, even you know, over the years, kind of watching the firm grow over time before I came back, it was really exciting to see. And the values, would say probably would be the biggest thing that was the sign to me that this was the right firm for me long-term. You know, really they've held strong with their values over the years, and it shows in the culture.
So what's your thinking?
Yeah, I agree with Amanda. I think it doesn't matter the size of a firm. It's really about the people. And, you know, we make these plans either as I'm making plans for my future, or Amanda and Dong stepped into companies It's really about, do you see in the people an alignment? And for me, in hiring everybody we hire, wherever they are in their career, it's about sensing that cultural alignment, that comfortable fit, their values as people and their values as architects. And we're building the entire firm, I mean, all the time, right? This is my 28th year, and one is always building the people, because that's what a firm is the people. So I think that cultural human connection, I joke about the dating, but that's how you feel, you know, when you walk in the bar and go, oh, that's kind of neat, that's kind of fun. And it's like when that person walks through the door to interview and say, I'm kind of interested in your company. And it's like, yeah, this could fit, this feels right. And it's more about that than most anything on the resume.
Thank you. Well, Dong, how did you select the firm to merge with?
I think it was Phil used a meeting somebody at the bar, and to some extent, it is kind of like meeting somebody at the bar. I met the marketing director of Dialogue about 3 years ago at a pre-proposal event. They were looking for a small local business, and I wasn't necessarily, for that particular project, I wasn't necessarily looking for anybody. Anyways, after first conversation, and her name is Lori Wesolek, and Lori goes, oh, Dong, this is a great meeting. Obviously, we're clear that we're not going to partner on this meeting, but I would like you to meet one of my partners. And Marion out of Vancouver actually met with me a couple weeks after. Long story short, we really had an honest, transparent conversation. I'm going to be blunt about it. I mean, in my back of my head, there was some thinking about, okay, what would happen? I thought about potentially one of the options might be, okay, maybe we could collaborate on some projects together with other practice. But when we sat down and had lunch, for some reason that both of us got into a really honest, transparent conversation. And it's like, well, Marianne says, we're looking for a practice like you. And I kind of was like, you know what? I wouldn't necessarily be opposed to collaborating with larger practice. But what I found very intriguing was that there was that sense of honesty. And then the fact that we as the Dialogue are so flat. There are plus minus 60 partners plus 600 dialoguers. And we're not a corporate structure. And when I saw that structure, I was like a little bit of awestruck. It's like, holy cow, I never seen a structure like this. And that's the one that actually got me most interesting, especially when we're considering that our why is for that design excellence in pursuit of community well-being, plus the what we do for our environment. Those things truly align. That's how I met Dialogue.
Thank you.
Yeah, I have to agree with Dong about that. You know, you really have to be able to have those honest conversations. You know, where do you see the firm headed? You know, what types of projects are we interested in collectively? And, you know, it's good if everyone in the room doesn't have the same exact answer. You want to have some, you know, discussion about it, and always going back to, you know, the values and principles of the firm, and understanding, you know, how does that fit in with our values, and that it just makes the work better.
Yeah, and it has to be eyes wide open, both sides, because otherwise it's not going to work, you know. And I think that honesty of saying, look, this is who I am, and then hearing from the other side who they are and what you want. And it's like saying, is this a good fit? Because you're not going to trick yourself in, or they're not going to trick you, and it's not going to work. So it really goes back to that honesty, that's just the truth of human beings sitting there saying, what do you like to do? What are you good at? What do you want? And then seeing if it can come together.
I'm curious, so Don, you went through ownership transition twice, or 2.5 times, as you say, and you've seen succession planning from the incoming side as well as the leading party. And Amanda, you are and have been experiencing succession planning from the incoming leader's perspective. So what is it like? What is this planning process? Tell us more about it.
Well, I'll start off. I would say incoming, I've said this in our past conversations, that the agreement part of it is probably the most straightforward. It still takes time, and it's still a series of meetings to go through all the details of it and understand it and discuss it. But after that, after you're announced as the next generation of partners, I think that's where, you can have a plan for how the culture will evolve around it, and what your vision is and what you plan to do. But there really are unknowns. So I think one of the great things that we did was working with Elisabeth to formulate a retreat, plan for a retreat, and start to look at that strategic plan and really put a lot of work behind it. And knowing and just the realization that you need to do that and to keep up with it. I think that really helped organize us, and it really was great for the entire firm in the end.
There was a lot of clarification happening at that time as to who's doing what in the leadership, including writing very precise job descriptions up to the very top level. I was very impressed by that.
Yeah, I think starting to look at that and being able to talk more about that path to leadership, what the vision is, and that it's something you're continuously working on. It's not something that you set and it's decided on, that it evolves over time, and being okay with that, just as long as you're making that incremental progress and checking in and communicating with one another as a leadership team. Because in our case, we meet as principals and associates to look at that plan and the tracking of it through the retreat and then after.
There was also a communication plan developed for for the next generation that was part of the retreat already, and B, to the office, and so they would know, oh, this is how they were going to work.
Yeah, I think that helped us a lot. I think coming from a world of remote work, when you tell people we should meet more, that's always tough. But in our case, it was time well spent, and it still is. We continue to have our regular meetings, and it helps keep us all organized, and everyone knows what everyone else is doing.
Dong, what is your perspective on that?
My perspectives have been changing. First go around was, I was the incoming principal, young kid who was coming into the process. But fortunately, at that time, my counterpart, Dave Byers, was really helpful. I think, Amanda, what you said about communication and having a clear expectation and management, I think that's a key, right? And I'm seeing a list of participants. I'm going to actually do a little bit of a shout out to Michael Strogoff, because he was actually instrumental in our first process, setting up the kind of the bylaws, the structures, and being able to help that out. And being clear about that was really helpful. The second time around I was in a search for a means to actually creating additional partners, but instead we went sideways and I merged with a larger company, which was a little bit of a different perspective, because I realized that when that merger happened, it is not only about me, I'm actually impacting the livelihood of my entire team. If this merger goes south, I'm actually messing with their lives and kind of looking out for the interest as a whole. And also thinking that, we as Dialogue at the time when merging with an unknown entity, that would have been a kind of a challenge for them. So having a perspective of empathy, putting in yourselves in different people's shoes and trying to see, okay, what are they thinking? What are some challenging points? What are some pain points? And trying to think about that. And now as a partner, we're always 24/7 thinking about succession plans, because we as a larger organizations, we cannot stop thinking about that. And also recognizing that now as a so-called tenured partner of a year and a half, thinking about new partners who are coming in, what are their pain points? What are they thinking? What are their needs? And making sure that we provide opportunities for new partners to successfully navigate themselves and contribute to the overall partnership. Many different perspectives, and I imagine I'll probably learn a thing or two a couple of years from now as well.
We talked yesterday, and I'll ask you both, Dong and Amanda, that question again, that you've entered into very specific structures and agreements that certainly with dialogue with that big of an organization, it's a very deeply tested agreement. And Amanda with, the multiple principles. And I asked what the structure was in that for retirement. And you're stepping in. I'm looking to gently move out over the next 5 or 10 years. And did they also have language and structure for when you decide to step out and what your compensation or responsibility might be?
So I'll take that one, and then I'm kind of reading the check. Mickey, as well as the Michael Strogoff, had something similar to that effect about the financial structure. And this is, I'll talk about we as dialogue first. Financially, I came in with nothing, and I will be going out with nothing. Meaning, when we merged, which was a true merger, there was no financial transaction. People might be wondering, what is wrong with you, Dong? You just gave away your entire practice. Are you stupid? In my opinion, you know what? I was not stupid. I think I was actually smart. My liability, entire liability disappeared. My payroll, my workers' comp, all that stuff, any kind of responsibility in terms of like legal liability, dialogue as whole was taken in. But what I got out of it was I could truly pursue the projects that have meaning to me. Right now, I'm working on a project in Vancouver for student housing, which is, I think, 450 bed housing in Vancouver. I pursued a project with my partners in Toronto doing a community center for a disadvantaged neighborhood in Toronto. My another partner and I chased a project, and it's a competition in South Korea doing a library project. And we actually won something over at the Zero Net Energy competitions for PG&E. And then also lastly, also thinking about projects kind of pursuing Mexico City plaza development. I, as a small practice in Bayern scheme design work, would never have thought about doing things like that. And relating to that, our partnership agreement states, for some odd reason, dialogue dissolves, any kind of a leftover proceeding, we're going to donate to a third-party charity of our choosing, and none of the partners actually get anything out other than what's in our so-called accounts. So on that note, yeah, it's a still kind of interesting perspective, but I'm also, in terms of financially, I'm betting the fact that I'm going to do quite well, and I have been doing quite well. And I'm going to personally invest that in a way that I'm going to support myself down the road.
Good. So you all have been or are in the journey that leadership transitions create. So what kind of pinch points or milestones can you share related to legal or personal matters? Nobody?
I think I can take that one to start. I think the agreement part of it, like I was saying before, it's a series of meetings, and you have time to understand, what the agreement is, to ask questions, to do your own research. So I think that part of the process went well for us. Also, I think one of the nice ways that the discussion started out was we were given a description of the role of what a principal is responsible for. And I think that was an important moment, because it's not just the transaction of buying and selling shares. It is, are you ready to take on this role? And that was an important step. But I think, like I was saying before, I think that once you get past the agreement, the pinch points are probably just, which happens over time. It's not going to be overnight, but kind of transitioning into that role in the office, and, it's a little bit different than, before you become a partner and you transition to become a project architect or a project manager. This is a career transition that, you're going through, and you also, the studio, sees you transition as well. So I think, I wouldn't call it pinch point per se, but I think it's, there are unknowns, and you try to do the best you can through the transition to continue to carry on the values, but also, how can you bring new ideas and strengthen the culture and just continue to take the firm further.
Yeah, and my pinch point might be just quite, it really came, I think, because of I turned 60 last year, and I have friends who've retired in their early 60s. And I used to think, my gosh, why are they retiring? They've got so much to offer. They're just hitting their stride. And I really do feel like I should live and work to be 100, because I'm going to be really good at this by the time I'm 100. But there was something that started to shift, and just think about, the shift came with the possibility, with having a maturing firm, with having enough there to share. That allowed me the freedom to think, this might be possible. There may be a chance here that I can start to share the structure, share the responsibility, to bring me back to the core part of the firm that I love, which is the design and the client relationships, but start to share all the work of running a firm. And so for me, that was a pinch point in my life of like, oh, I can visualize not carrying this and then just closing the door. And so that was a really exciting realization. And then I think that, again, like Amanda, you hit these milestones, and we're so much in this conceptual early, just taking care of the firm. And then I think that there are these moments, the valuation and looking at the, rubber hit the road. What are the numbers on the table, which is one piece, versus the whole human beings and what do you want to do? So it is interesting for those of us listening who aren't 30 or 40 or maybe even 50 is, our time is a pinch point. And are we going to have enough time to plan to do this well, thoughtfully, graciously, to give the next generation time to take it all in and absorb it? Because it's all about developing this strong structure that can just start to take pieces off of the owner and start to step up, and how that reduction in the owner's role and then the new owner, next generation leaning in.
What role does culture and your personality, if you will, play in succession planning?
Well, I'll just say everything. I think it's everything, because you could hire people on a resume. Okay, they know how to build a house. Okay, they know how to do this. And it's just a small piece of it. So I think it's everything, your values, your excitement. You're basically building a professional family with a firm. You're looking to step into a family. You're looking to say, hey, you want to show up every day and hang out here and do this work. And then, hey, you want to do it more in the future, and I'll do it a little less. So to me, values, culture, human beings are everything.
Yeah, I'd have to agree with Jill. It's the foundation for everything. And I think what has been a little bit of a learning process for me personally is that, it's constantly evolving. So really to be able to listen to the entire studio and hear, everyone's perspective and their interests, and, try to distill that all down into, how does that form the culture, and how does that support what we're going to be doing in the future, and really listening and making sure that we're keeping the culture strong. It's the foundation to everything we do. I completely agree with what Jill was saying.
If I may add that to it a little bit, it is personal. Yet in my case, it's my personal playing field just became too big. Like, unfortunately, I will not ever get to, I'll be lying to you if I will be getting no $600. That's never going to happen. But what kind of adding to what Amanda and Joe have said, which is the same thing, basically. What is our culture? What is our why? Do we truly align for the strategic direction that we at practice? Do we align? And celebrating each one's pursuit of those hard work in pursuit of the strategic direction. And fact that we could try to put ourselves in one another's shoes and be empathetic and be able to support it. I agree. It's the culture that we build within a larger context.
So you went from 10 to 600 people, yet you have the same staff here. From what I understand, no turnover in the last 18 months or 24 months. What does it mean to be an employee at Dialogue now compared to an employee at BKDW 4 years ago?
I mean, so I never thought about it, but one of my clients actually thought, like, I think you're doing something right. It's like, well, what are you talking about? All of your team for the past 2 years they haven't left you. I'm like, okay. Realizing that, including my family household, I'm gonna spill a dirty laundry. My wife actually called it quits with her work. But with that, I thought about it. It's like, you know what? I really appreciate the fact that our team kind of stuck with me. But more importantly, I think our team has more opportunities, and they have used to be kind of a more close relationship, which is good. I'd still like to keep that, but I think they're connecting with others, other opportunities and things that interest them more, which has been awesome. You know, we have teams working all over working with different teams. And then don't get me wrong, as much as I hate it, the pandemic kind of opened a lot of means to actually collaborate cross countries. It truly did. And we're truly doing that. But overall, I think in support of our strategic direction, our team is also finding their own groove. And I like the fact that they could do that on their own.
Awesome. Thank you, everybody. So I would like to open up to taking some of the questions that are already posted in the chat. So I encourage everybody, and in the audience, if you have questions, please post them via the chat. Amanda, the first one is, have the original partners at HGW stayed active in the firm, and are they planning to taper off as they sell their shares?
The founding partners are still very active. Nothing has changed there. In fact, that's been really critical to our transition because their support and mentorship has been a large part of the success of the transition. You know, as the other leaders in the office, as we talk about what kind of project types are we interested in? Are we interested in a new market that we haven't worked in before? We have their support and their advice along the way of how they would approach it, you know, different pursuits and different insights that they have. So I think that that has been great. And as far as tapering off, we haven't discussed that. Of course, there is a time frame to succession plans, and that, you know, that's important. But that hasn't been discussed. We're just, you know, really at the early stages, I would say, of the entire timeline.
Yeah, my understanding is they're fully active, and I think the timeline has been vaguely set between 5 and 10 years that they are stepping out of the business, but not defined. What does it mean to be a legacy firm? Is Andy asked as well. Might go back to my kind of categorization, but I let you answer it.
Well, Jill actually asked a question the other day that I thought was interesting, which is, you know, do you think about retirement yourself? And I said, I hope I'm coming back to one of Elisabeth's panels and talking about, you know, the next generation in this office. So I would say, you know, the idea of the legacy firm is just like Jill was saying, you know, not closing the doors to the firm that, you know, we're the next generation of partners, but after us, there'll be another generation. And that's part of what's exciting about it as well.
Thank you. So there's a question for you, two actually. You mentioned annual valuations. How long have you been getting those? And the second question, you mentioned valuations for an inner buyout or external buyouts. Does the valuation differ for each?
Yes, so 3 years ago, I hired a company called Danable and McKee, and I worked with Victor Vaccaro to do evaluation of the company. And he looked back 2 years, so we had 3 years at that point. And it was terrific at the time because I didn't know if the firm was worth, $50 or a little more. And so he values the company based upon all industry metrics, which is really helpful because you see your gross utilization rate and you see your multipliers, and he gives you all the industry metrics. So just from a management point of view, it gives everything being relative to what others in the industry of your size and discipline are doing. So it was very helpful internally, and just out of curiosity, if I were ever able to have a transition, what might this look like? And they do value it differently for an external sale versus an internal sale. And it's quite different with a sole proprietorship, a single person firm, because it's not as easy to monetize one person's influence on a firm and take that and sell it externally. That does have a higher value on the street than internally. And I know Elisabeth does this work also. And then internally, the number I think was about 20% less or 15% less than that. And then I've been maintaining it. And so that has been really helpful. I think the first round, cost me like $5,000 or $6,000 to get there, or $7,000 to get this metric. And now we use a lot of these metrics with Elisabeth in understanding how the company's doing and all these little micro adjustments.
Thank you. A question for Dang. Can you explain more about Dialogue's flat organizational structure? How does it work, and how is this different from a traditional firm's or corporate ladder/pyramid structure?
Interesting question. And being honest, that's the reason that I become a part of Dialogue. First of all, we're a partnership. We're not a corporation, and each one of us partners. And I guess the biggest difference is question of our practice valuation. We have no practice valuation. Partners don't come in with nothing. We don't go out with anything. We don't, in terms of partners value, we put $0 on value of a partner. Reason being is that every year, profit, we make quite a nice profit, and we divide them up. But the way we divide them up is performance. Did you win the job? How well did you do on it? And we value on how much did we contribute to the practice as a whole, not project specifically. And we go through a distribution process every year. Meaning, 1 year partner, if he or she, they, whoever may be, does really, really well, that person gets compensated. Person does not do really well, may not get compensated. But also at the same time, we as collective, if one of the partners, like let's say, including myself, a partner coming in, are not really had a hard time transitioning into it. But then we as the overall group, as a distributing committee, let's take care of that person a little bit. So we kind of balance those things out, right? So there's a lot more other things. I'll be more than happy to catch up with you. I think it was Mickey who posed that question. But long story short, because the fact that we don't have numbers of shares, every partner gets one vote. We as collective support one another in an equal sense. We consider that a very flat organization.
Oh, interesting. I have a question. It goes back to Dong and the whole panel. Michael Strogoff thanks you, Dong, and great discussion about culture and leadership issues. And the question for the panelists is, from a financial perspective, how can someone buy into a highly profitable firm so that current owners realize the value they have created. I take a very quick first pass on that. I have been able to structure internal buyouts with a deferred payment plan in the recent past that worked out successfully for highly profitable firms. It allows the incoming leaders to basically like buying a house with a mortgage. You get access to the profit to pay out the previous owners over or the current owners over a certain period of time. Very, very much simplified process right now that I explained. But I open it up to the panelists. What is your take on that?
I'm hoping you're going to help us sort that out in the future. I know Kelly and I are very curious about how that's going to work. I'll leave it at that. All I know is that people do it at all sizes of firms. You know, companies do this, and you do it with all different levels of magnitude. And so I think that I think Kelly and I are both hopeful that if we choose to enter into an agreement, that there is a way for it to make sense for the next generation. So Amanda, I'd love to hear about how you handled this.
Yes. So and we continue to talk about this, you know, as the next generation will buy shares over time. I think probably the biggest takeaway from it was that first buy-in, you know, making it accessible for that next generation, and going from there. That was thought about and discussed, and that kind of plays into how, you know, when you forecast it out over years. And
And then my case was, I mean, obviously dialogue, there was nothing, but previously my first round of becoming a partner. First of all, I think they buy-ins quite a bit because we value the firm and we settle on numbers of shares. And basically the first 5% that I received was a gift from Dave. I mean, you could argue that that year I did not receive a bonus. So whether it was a bonus that became a gift, whatever it is, but I feel very fortunate that he was able to give that share as the initial, just like you said, Amanda, he made it very accessible. And each year the plan was the profit. Obviously, I will keep some of that for tax purposes as well as the other things that personally I have to take care of. But some of the so-called profit that I'll be receiving would be used to further buy additional share of the practice. That's how mine was.
I'm giving you the last question before we wrap up the event. We're getting very close to 9 o'clock. Does legacy specifically relate to keeping the original partners' names on the doors, so to speak?
Well, I
already made a decision on that.
Yeah. So for the most part, yes. We over time became known as HGW, so we are going through a rebranding effort to be HGW. But you know, beyond that, we don't plan on changing the firm name because of our reputation, and that is part of our legacy as well. So that was important to keep.
Yeah, and I think, you know, with a single person's name on the door, that's a harder story for the future because it won't be about me, you know, it's about the next generation. And so that's something we haven't talked about is rebranding. We're not there yet. But I think that, again, that transition of how that the 30 some years I will have with that name in this small community of the Cape, and what that brings for confidence and respect, and how that benefits the firm, but then how the next generation will be there to carry it on. So I think that's a really interesting piece of the story.
Young's firm made already the decision. They all agreed, I guess, at some point to a very catchy name, I think. I like it. Well, thank you so much to the panelists for sharing your stories so openly and letting everybody get a glance on how the process is working, has been working for you. And thank you to the audience for joining us today. I hope you got excited and we could give you some insights. Stay tuned. I will have another event coming up in 2 weeks, and you can see it on my newsletters. Thank you so much and goodbye.
Thank you.
Thank you.